Luxury amid poverty, the real estate scandal of Sierra Leone's first family, and the question of illicit wealth in African leadership. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where truth confronts power and the people come first. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. In tonight's special report, we expose a growing scandal that has rocked Sierra Leone's political establishment. As President Julius Maada Bio pledged to fight corruption, his wife and her family allegedly went on a secret luxury property shopping spree in the Gambia. How did a First Lady go from a London council flat to multi-million-dollar villas on the Atlantic coast? And who paid the price? Stay with us as we uncover the facts, follow the money, and compare this case to similar power abuses across Africa. This is not just about one family. It's about the future of African leadership. A sweeping investigation by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, has uncovered that since President Julius Maada Bio took office in 2018, his wife, First Lady Fatima Bio, and several of her close family members have acquired at least 10 luxury properties in the Gambia, totaling over $2.1 million. The purchases, many involving questionable financial backings and a top Sierra Leone government contractor, raise serious red flags about potential misuse of public office for private gain. This scandal encapsulates a broader pattern of opaque wealth accumulation by political elites across Africa, undermining anti-corruption rhetoric, governance reforms, and public trust. Fatima Bio's property empire in the Gambia. Between 2022 and 2024, Fatima Bio purchased 4 high-end properties in Gambia, while her mother and half-brothers acquired additional villas and apartments in some of the country's most exclusive neighborhoods, including Brufut Heights and the Senegambia Strip, OCCRP 2024. Notably, a $500,000 villa was bought in her mother's name. Her half-brother, Abdul Moise Darbo, acquired 2 more properties in 2024 alone, including a penthouse at Fahara waterfront. Several acquisitions show the signature or financial involvement of Alfonso King, a top Sierra Leone government contractor, raising serious conflict of interest concerns. Red flags. There is no clear evidence of wealth or income sources that could justify the purchases. Fatima Bio previously resided in a low-income London council flat, and there are ongoing questions about her continued tenancy of the property. Her relatives' tax records and employment history show minimal reported income. Legal and ethical dilemmas. The scale of these acquisitions and their proximity to political office raise a host of unresolved legal and ethical questions. Conflict of interest. Government contractor Alfonso King signed documents for at least 3 property purchases and reportedly paid a $9,000 stamp duty for one of the villas, OCCRP 2024. Lack of financial transparency. Neither President Bio nor the First Lady disclosed the source of the funds despite direct inquiries. Violation of procurement ethics. King's firm received at least $4.8 million in government contracts, including for a project closely associated with the First Lady. This dynamic replicates what anti-corruption scholars call a kleptocratic loop, where public power is leveraged to amass private wealth under weak enforcement structures. Africa-wide comparison, a familiar pattern of political wealth. The revelations about the Bio family's acquisitions are part of a larger trend observed across Africa. Country leader involved allegation type, notable scandal Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang Nguema, lavish family spending, U.S. DOJ seizures, Teodorin Obiang's $30 Malibu mansion, Ferraris, Michael Jackson memorabilia, Kenya Uhuru, Kenyatta, family land grabbing, offshore accounts, Pandora Papers, exposed secret assets abroad. Nigeria, various ex-leaders' embezzlement, offshore properties, General Sani Abacha's looted billions recovered globally. Congo-Brazzaville, Denis Sassou Nguesso Paris Real Estate Empire, Unexplained Wealth, OCCRP's Congo Holdup Investigations, South Africa, Jacob Zuma State Capture, Gupta's Influence, Zondo Commission Revelations. The BO case stands out for its proximity to power, rapid timeline, and the First Lady's own high-profile public anti-corruption and advocacy roles, making the discrepancy even more jarring. Implications for governance and rule of law in Sierra Leone. 1. Anti-corruption in name only. President Bio's administration campaigned on a promise to fight corruption with sincerity. However, as Transparency International 2023 noted, his tenure has been marred by weak institutional checks on executive power, politicized procurement, limited access to public data, with no updated procurement report since 2019. 2. State capture indicators. This case illustrates what economists call elite capture, where policy and state resources are shaped primarily to serve the interests of a connected elite rather than the broader citizenry. 3. Public sector, morale, and inequality. With Sierra Leone ranked among the poorest nations, UNDP HDI Index 2023, public outrage grows when leaders are seen indulging in luxury abroad. The Gambia, though a sovereign state, becomes a safe haven for laundering wealth away from domestic scrutiny, a recurring theme in African politics. The cocaine kingpin scandal, criminal nexus. Further complicating the issue is Fatima Bio's online video showing her family socializing with Dutch cocaine trafficker Joos Lydekers, convicted in absentia in June 2024 for smuggling 7 tons of cocaine, robbery, and assassination plots. Dutch Justice Ministry 2024. Dutch authorities submitted an extradition request in February 2025. Sierra Leone's Attorney General says the request is under review. The Ministry of Information claimed ignorance about Lydeker's identity, despite public appearances with the First Family. This raises urgent concerns about potential criminal infiltration of high-level government circles, akin to narco-state characteristics seen in Guinea-Bissau's past, UNODC 2012. The Gambia as an offshore real estate haven. The Bio family's choice of the Gambia is strategic, lacks financial regulations, weak land registry enforcement, close cultural and familial ties, high privacy for foreign buyers. Real estate purchases, they are becoming increasingly popular among West African elites, seeking to obscure wealth, echoing trends seen in Cape Verde, Dubai, and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Global Witness 2022. A forward-looking approach. What must be done? To deter further abuse and re-establish public trust, Sierra Leone and regional partners must 1. Implement full asset disclosure mandate, real-time asset registers for political leaders and family members, updated yearly. 2. Enforce public procurement reforms. The Public Procurement Authority must resume annual reports and bar politically exposed persons, PEPs, from benefiting indirectly. 3. Investigate unexplained wealth. Launch a commission of inquiry into the Bio family's assets, invoking precedents from South Africa's Zondo Commission or Kenya's Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC. 4. Cross-border legal cooperation. Strengthen treaties between ECOWAS states for the prosecution and repatriation of illicit assets. 5. Strengthen civil society oversight. Empower local watchdogs and media with legal protections and funding to expose wrongdoing. 6. Institutionalize whistleblower protections. Similar to Ghana's 2020 whistleblower bill, ensure protections for insiders who expose high-level corruption. Global financial institutions and donor dilemma. Should the tap stay open? Sierra Leone remains heavily dependent on international aid and concessional loans. In 2023 alone, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, disbursed $20.7 million under the Extended Credit Facility, IMF 2023, while the World Bank committed over $450 million in various sectors including health, education, and infrastructure. But how should global financial institutions respond when recipient countries demonstrate patterns of high-level corruption? 1. Conditional aid disbursement. The IMF and World Bank must make future disbursements contingent upon tangible reforms, enforce declarations of assets for senior officials and their families, timely publication of procurement audits, legislative independence of anti-corruption bodies such as the Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC. 2. Aid recalibration based on governance metrics. Institutions could revise their country policy and institutional assessment, CPIA, scores for Sierra Leone, which influence grant allocations. A downward revision in transparency and accountability components would signal disapproval and recalibrate aid toward more tightly monitored sectors. 3. Increased use of third-party monitors. Donors may consider routing funds through independent third parties or international NGOs for large-scale infrastructure and social development programs, bypassing potentially compromised government systems. The diaspora's rising role in accountability. The Sierra Leonean diaspora, particularly in the UK, US, and Canada, has grown increasingly vocal on social media and international platforms about governance failures. Given that Fatima Bio once resided in a UK council flat and the president fundraised among the diaspora during his opposition years, the diaspora is uniquely positioned to demand transparency. Strategies for diaspora engagement. Pressure on UK authorities to investigate the continued occupancy of subsidized housing by the First Lady, potentially violating tenancy laws, Southwark Council 2024. Mobilizing petitions to international bodies like the Commonwealth Secretariat and African Union, urging accountability investigations, crowdsourced journalism, partnering with platforms like OCCRP and African Investigative Journalism Consortium to track asset ownership and money flows. The diaspora could become the most effective accountability lever if organized across jurisdictions, especially in the UK and EU, where financial transparency laws are tightening. The silencing of institutions, Sierra Leone's fragile checks and balances. Despite the mandate and resources allocated to the Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC, no formal investigation has been launched into the First Family's foreign real estate holdings. Critics argue the ACC has been selectively aggressive, pursuing opposition figures and civil servants while avoiding direct probes into the presidency. Key symptoms of institutional capture: delayed or absent audits of procurement agencies since 2019. Legislative complacency. Parliament has not summoned the President or First Lady to clarify the allegations. Media intimidation. Journalists investigating corruption, including those referencing OCCRP's findings, report being surveilled or harassed. Reporters Without Borders 2024. Without functioning checks and balances, power becomes unaccountable. Sierra Leone risks sliding into a soft authoritarianism, where elections occur, but governance transparency and institutional independence erode. Lessons from the continent: what others got right. While corruption is endemic across Africa, some nations have successfully pushed back against elite impunity. Country reform action taken outcome. Botswana, asset recovery and lifestyle audits of public officials ranked Africa's least corrupt by Transparency ENTL 2023. Ghana, introduction of Office of Special Prosecutor 2018. Several high-level prosecutions, though slow. South Africa, Zondo Commission on State Capture 2018-2022. Led to prosecution of former ministers and regulatory reforms, Rwanda Real-Time Asset Registry, and centralized procurement system, marked improvement in global governance rankings. Sierra Leone can draw inspiration from these models by enacting independent commissions, leveraging digital tools for procurement, and enforcing mandatory wealth declarations. Intergenerational theft, the cost of corruption on Sierra Leone's youth. While the first family invests millions abroad, Sierra Leonean youth face 70% youth unemployment, UNDP 2024, rising food and fuel prices due to currency depreciation, dilapidated health and education systems. The opportunity cost of corruption is borne by the next generation. Every misallocated dollar is a stolen textbook, a lost vaccination, or an unbuilt classroom. This aligns with the African Development Bank's 2023 report, which estimated that Africa loses over $140 billion annually to corruption, funds that could otherwise meet 60% of the continent's development goals. Unanswered questions that demand immediate clarification. As of this writing, the following questions remain unanswered. 1. What is the exact source of funds used by the First Lady and her relatives for the purchase and development of these properties? 2. What business transactions has Alfonso King conducted with the government of Sierra Leone since 2019? 3. Has the Anti-Corruption Commission launched an inquiry into the revelations by OCCRP? 4. What is the current legal status of the First Lady's council flat in Southwark, London? 5. Has the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU, of Sierra Leone flagged any suspicious transfers abroad by politically exposed persons? Diplomatic fallout and Sierra Leone's international image at risk. The revelations about the First family's real estate spree and alleged ties to a convicted European drug trafficker could severely damage Sierra Leone's diplomatic standing, especially at a time when the country is seeking deeper integration into international partnerships and financial markets. Key diplomatic concerns. 1. EU-Sierra Leone. Relations. The presence of Josle Dekkers, a convicted Dutch drug lord, at public functions with the First family may strain Sierra Leone's bilateral relations with the Netherlands and the wider European Union. The EU has been one of Sierra Leone's major development partners, providing nearly $376 million between 2014 and 2020, European Commission EDF reports. If the Dutch extradition request continues to stall, it could trigger diplomatic sanctions, visa restrictions, or even a reassessment of EU aid programs. 2. United Nations image. President Bio has positioned himself as a global advocate on gender equity, peace building, and anti-corruption. First Lady Fatima Bio has spoken at UN platforms, including her flagship Hands Off Our Girls campaign. Yet her proximity to unaccounted wealth undermines the very credibility of her advocacy. 3. US and UK watchdogs. Given the couple's historical ties to the UK and the US, including educational, residential, and fundraising connections, the revelations may trigger financial scrutiny under foreign anti-money laundering laws, e.g., the UK Unexplained Wealth Orders and the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. British and American watchdog groups such as Transparency International UK and the National Crime Agency may be compelled to open probes into asset declarations and beneficial ownership registries. In today's interconnected world, a scandal of this nature is no longer a domestic issue. It becomes a geopolitical liability. The role of Gambia, a safe haven or complicit enabler. Gambia's role as the geographic host for these luxury assets also demands examination. While no direct complicity has been established, the pattern of real estate purchases by West African political elites in Gambian coastal estates reveals systemic vulnerabilities in the country's financial transparency regime. Structural weaknesses in the Gambian system. Weak enforcement of real estate regulation. Many property transfers rely on handwritten records and informal lease applications dating back decades, as seen in Fatima Bio's $44,000 villa transaction in Bijilo. lack of beneficial ownership transparency. Gambian land and property registries often record purchases in nominal names without verifying ultimate beneficiaries. Tax loopholes and underreporting. As revealed in this case, key individuals involved, including Yusufa Darbo and Abdul Mois Darbo, paid little or no income tax despite owning or developing multi-million-dollar properties. This dynamic positions the Gambia, alongside countries like Mauritius and Seychelles, as increasingly attractive, lightly regulated real estate markets for elites to stash unexplained wealth. Needed reforms in the Gambia: implement automatic exchange of information mechanisms with other ECOWAS states. Introduce unexplained wealth orders to allow authorities to seize or freeze assets until lawful income sources are proven. Digitize the land registry with blockchain or secure digital tools to prevent retroactive backdating of transactions. Public sentiment and political ramifications in Sierra Leone. As the 2028 election cycle begins to loom, the unfolding scandal could become a major flashpoint in Sierra Leone's domestic political arena. Reactions on the ground: opposition mobilization. Leaders from the All People's Congress, APC, and other smaller parties are beginning to amplify the OCCRP findings in their media statements and community engagements, calling for an independent investigation and international intervention. Civil society outcry. Influential advocacy organizations such as the Center for Accountability and Rule of Law, CARL, and the Institute for Governance Reform, IGR, have called for a full public disclosure of all First Family assets, both domestic and foreign. Youth activism, hashtags like Kaka Resign Fatima Bio and Where Is the Money have started trending among Sierra Leonean youth on platforms such as Twitter, now X, TikTok, and Facebook, reflecting growing anger over governance failures amid persistent poverty, high cost of living, and joblessness. In a nation where over 60% of the population is under 25, ignoring this wave of discontent could have severe political consequences. Sierra Leone's legal recourse and the case for a special commission. Given the magnitude and complexity of the allegations, a conventional anti-corruption probe may not suffice. Sierra Leonean civil society and opposition leaders are now calling for the establishment of a special presidential commission of inquiry modeled on high-profile international precedents. Case studies in specialized investigations, South Africa. The Zondo Commission successfully revealed the scope of state capture under Jacob Zuma's presidency and recommended criminal charges against numerous senior officials. Kenya. The Public Accounts Committee, through parliamentary powers, launched targeted hearings on public procurement irregularities under the Uhuru Kenyatta regime. Nigeria. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has occasionally prosecuted former first ladies and their proxies for money laundering and real estate fraud. Key features proposed for the Sierra Leone inquiry. Mandate: investigate all overseas property purchases by PEPs, politically exposed persons, since 2018, with a special focus on the Gambia. Jurisdiction: empowered to subpoena witnesses, freeze bank accounts, and refer findings for prosecution. Transparency: proceedings to be open to the public and live streamed to ensure accountability. A credible inquiry, led by respected jurists and backed by international observers, may be Sierra Leone's best chance at reversing the erosion of public trust. ECOWAS and regional anti-corruption collaboration. The Fatima Bio case offers an inflection point for ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, to revisit and strengthen its anti-corruption and financial crime frameworks. Regional coordination opportunities. ECOWAS Financial Intelligence Network, FN. must be revived and expanded to track cross-border property acquisitions and suspicious transactions by high-ranking officials and their families. ECOWAS Court of Justice can be petitioned by civil society organizations if domestic remedies prove ineffective, particularly when state officials are involved. West African Asset Recovery Initiative, modeled after the Africa Initiative on illicit financial flows. ECOWAS could establish a dedicated unit for regional asset tracing and repatriation. By strengthening regional mechanisms, ECOWAS can deter political elites from exploiting jurisdictional gaps for personal enrichment. Toward ethical leadership, policy reforms for a new political culture. The scandal involving Fatima Bio and her relatives reveals a much deeper crisis than mere asset accumulation. It exposes the entrenched culture of impunity that continues to define much of West African politics. Rebuilding public trust and promoting ethical leadership in Sierra Leone requires robust structural reforms, not cosmetic declarations. Policy proposals for ethical governance. 1. Mandatory lifestyle audits for PEPs and their families. Inspired by models in Rwanda and Ghana, a lifestyle audit law would mandate annual scrutiny of assets, spending patterns, and travel history for all politically exposed persons, PEPs, including spouses and immediate family. Discrepancies between income and lifestyle would trigger automatic investigations by the Anti-Corruption Commission or the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU. 2. Constitutional Amendment for Spousal Accountability. Amend sections 41 and 49 of Sierra Leone's constitution to explicitly prohibit first spouses from engaging in any business ventures or accepting government-related contracts, either directly or through intermediaries. 3. Ban on government contractors engaging with political families. No person or entity that holds a public contract should be allowed to conduct personal business with the immediate family of government officials. This echoes South Africa's procurement reform post-Zondo Commission, which bans vendors from transacting with state officials outside regulated channels. 4. Digital Asset Register of Politicians. Publicly accessible, blockchain-verified asset registries should be maintained and updated quarterly. Nigeria's pilot initiative for digital declarations through the Code of Conduct Bureau could serve as a reference model. These reforms, if implemented, would make it difficult for any future political family to replicate the alleged pattern seen in the Bio family case without detection and consequence. The role of civic technology and whistleblower platforms. Technology has a critical role to play in exposing corruption, especially in contexts where traditional oversight institutions are weak or compromised. In the case of the First Lady's properties, the investigative collaboration between OCCRP, The Times, UK, and citizen data journalists was instrumental. Digital tools that can help. I paid a bribe. SL, a proposed citizen whistleblower site where public sector bribery, favoritism, and nepotism can be anonymously reported and publicly mapped. Asset Watch Africa, a civil society-run open database that traces property ownership, offshore accounts, and corporate beneficiaries linked to public officials. Crowdsourced FOI requests. Citizens can initiate Freedom of Information, FOI requests, especially regarding public contracts, customs transactions, and land leases, using mobile-based platforms like askthegovernment.org, inspired by Nigeria's Budge IT. By integrating these tools with social media mobilization, civic actors can significantly expand transparency and civic education among Sierra Leone's youth majority. The investor outlook, risk, reputation, and rule of law. For global investors, reputational risk matters as much as macroeconomic fundamentals. The Bio family's controversial dealings could deter much-needed private capital inflows to Sierra Leone and weaken investor confidence in the country's governance infrastructure. Key investment risks triggered. 1. Rule of law erosion. The inability of watchdog institutions to respond decisively signals a breakdown in legal predictability, one of the most important factors for foreign direct investment, FDI. International investors may interpret this as a systemic risk, particularly in real estate, mining, and tourism sectors. 2. Public procurement uncertainty. Firms doing business with the state, like Alfonso King Investment Limited, become case studies in regulatory arbitrage and favoritism, scaring away transparent bidders from donor-funded tenders. 3. Heightened due diligence for Sierra Leonean transactions. Multilateral institutions and banks may impose stricter Know Your Customer (KYC) rules on Sierra Leonean entities, leading to transaction delays and potential de-risking by global financial institutions. Unless urgently addressed, this reputational fallout could cost Sierra Leone years of progress in improving its ease of doing business, especially at a time when competition for African investment is intensifying. Rebuilding public trust, from performative politics to participatory democracy, beyond institutional reforms, Sierra Leone needs a moral reawakening, one that centers public service around humility, sacrifice, and transparency. Civic empowerment strategies. Civic education in schools. Embed governance, ethics, and anti-corruption modules in Sierra Leone's primary and secondary curriculum, training the next generation to reject impunity. Public town halls and presidential debates. Make it mandatory for heads of state and senior public figures to participate in annual televised town halls addressing corruption and governance, backed by questions from civil society and citizens. National Day of Accountability. Dedicate one day each year to review national progress on corruption, where the Anti-Corruption Commission, Auditor General's Office, and CSOs present a public scorecard of the administration's ethical performance. These initiatives will help change the prevailing political narrative, from patronage and secrecy to integrity and open dialogue. Opposition strategy and the 2028 electoral landscape. As the 2028 presidential election approaches, the opposition has a rare opportunity, but also a profound responsibility to capitalize on the public dissatisfaction generated by the Fatima Bio scandal. If well organized, the scandal could shift the political momentum toward greater accountability and systemic reform. Key strategic considerations for the opposition. 1. Issue-based campaigning over tribal or regional rhetoric. The Bio administration rose partly on an anti-Koroma wave of discontent in 2018. The opposition, particularly the APC, must avoid repeating old mistakes by focusing solely on personalities or ethnic lines. Instead, they should center their message on economic justice, anti-corruption, and reformist governance. 2. Demand for a parliamentary investigation. The opposition can file a motion for a joint committee of parliament to summon witnesses connected to the property transactions, including Alfonso King and officials from the Procurement Authority. 3. Engagement with civil society and international observers. Collaborative advocacy with groups like the Campaign for Good Governance, CGG, and the Institute for Legal Research and Advocacy for Justice, ILRADGI, can amplify electoral credibility and reduce fears of a return to politicized vengeance. 4. Shadow Cabinet Transparency Challenge. Opposition candidates should publish their own asset declarations, challenge President Bio's cabinet to do the same, and pledge to pass a First Family Financial Transparency Bill if elected. By taking the moral high ground, the opposition can rebuild its legitimacy and avoid the trap of being seen as merely power-hungry critics. The paradox of First Ladies in African politics. Icons or gateways to corruption? The evolving role of First Ladies across Africa is both inspirational and controversial. While many use their platforms to champion worthy causes, others have been implicated, directly or indirectly, in corruption scandals that undermine the credibility of their husbands' leadership. Notable African First Ladies. A comparative overview. Country First Lady. Public role scandal or allegation. Rwanda. Jeanette Kagame, founder of Imbuto Foundation. Widely praised for development work, no scandals reported. Zimbabwe Grace Mugabe, leader of ZANU-PF Women's League. Accused of illicit diamond deals. Lavish shopping sprees. Nigeria patience. Jonathan Women Empowerment campaigns. Linked to $15 frozen by EFCC due to suspected fraud. DR Congo. Olive Lembe Kabila. Low-profile humanitarian work. No direct accusations. Sierra Leone, Fatima Bio. Hands Off Our Girls campaign real estate scandal. Proximity to wanted drug trafficker. Fatima Bio's case is especially jarring given the contrast between her public advocacy for vulnerable girls and the financial opacity surrounding her family's sudden wealth. It reinforces a dangerous precedent where the office of the First Lady becomes a shield for unchecked privilege rather than a platform for transformation. Youth power and the rise of digital political consciousness. Sierra Leone's youth, who make up nearly 60% of the population, are increasingly connected, educated, and disillusioned. The scandal surrounding the First Family presents a generational moment where young people can either disengage from politics in frustration or rise up to reshape their country's future through democratic means. Paths to youth-led political reclamation. 1. Voter mobilization drives. University unions, tech hubs, and diaspora influencers can launch voter registration campaigns targeting 18 to 35-year-olds who often fall outside traditional political structures. 2. Online political education campaigns platforms like TikTok and WhatsApp can be leveraged for short-form content, explaining asset transparency, procurement processes, and constitutional rights. 3. Youth political action committees. Sierra Leonean youth should be encouraged to form PAC-style advocacy groups that can fund, support, or challenge candidates based on accountability benchmarks, not party loyalty. 4. Campus debates and accountability forums. Institutions like Fora Bay College and Njala University can host regular public accountability forums where local MPs and ministers are invited to answer tough questions from students. By fostering political literacy and civic responsibility, young Sierra Leoneans can break the cycle of inherited politics and corruption and build a meritocratic future. Media, narrative control, and the fight for truth. The role of independent media in exposing the Fatima Bio scandal cannot be overstated. Yet media practitioners in Sierra Leone continue to face intimidation, surveillance, and limited access to information, especially when reporting on the presidency or procurement. Challenges for media freedom, state pressure, and legal intimidation. Journalists risk defamation lawsuits or even arrest for seditious libel under legacy colonial laws, despite the 2020 repeal of criminal libel provisions. Limited access to procurement data. The suspension of the National Public Procurement Authority's annual reports after 2019 has severely curtailed journalistic oversight. Financial dependence. Many local media outlets are financially unstable and vulnerable to co-optation through advertising and political patronage. Recommendations to empower journalists, legal aid for investigative reporters, establish a fund to provide legal protection for journalists facing retaliation, data journalism training, equip journalists with skills in digital forensics, procurement tracking, and financial data analysis, public access to information law enforcement. Civil society must pressure the government to fully enforce the Right to Access Information Act, including punitive measures for non-compliance by public bodies. A well-equipped and protected media is a non-negotiable pillar of accountability. especially in countries with fragile institutions. The role of the international community between diplomacy and deterrence. While sovereignty is a foundational principle of international relations, corruption, especially of a transnational nature, demands collective accountability. The revelations about Sierra Leone's first family present a test case for how the international community responds when development assistance coincides with elite enrichment and democratic backsliding. What the international community can do: 1. Trigger targeted investigations and sanctions. Countries like the UK, EU member states, and the United States can invoke anti money laundering legislation, including the Global Magnitsky Act, to investigate or impose targeted sanctions on individuals suspected of corruption and human rights violations. These sanctions could include visa bans, asset freezes, and property seizures, especially in jurisdictions where the Bio family holds financial or real estate interests. 2. Launch a multilateral financial probe. A joint task force comprising the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, Interpol, and West African monetary institutions can be constituted to trace cross border money flows, particularly involving real estate acquisitions by politically exposed persons. 3. Impose anti corruption conditionalities on aid donors and multilateral banks, should condition disbursements on measurable anti corruption benchmarks. Publication of asset declarations, digitization of procurement systems, annual audits with independent civil society oversight. 4. Support local accountability initiatives. International development partners should increase direct funding to investigative journalism outlets, legal aid groups, and civic tech platforms that hold leaders accountable, especially where state institutions have been weakened. This approach ensures that foreign taxpayers are not indirectly financing political impunity and sends a clear message to other African leaders that corruption at the top will no longer be tolerated with silence. Judicial independence and the imperative of asset recovery. A functional justice system is the final line of defense against impunity. However, in Sierra Leone, as in many parts of Africa, the judiciary often operates under intense political pressure, limited resources, and opaque appointment processes. Problems hindering judicial oversight, executive interference. The appointment of judges, especially at the Supreme Court level, is still widely perceived to be influenced by the presidency. Delayed hearings. Key corruption and procurement cases often stall in pre-trial stages for years, weakening public faith in the courts. Lack of asset recovery mechanisms. Even where guilt is established, the state lacks a robust institutional framework for tracing, seizing, and repurposing stolen assets. Suggested reforms: 1. Establish a special financial crimes court with dedicated judges, prosecutors, and forensic accountants. This court could fast track high profile corruption cases and operate with procedural safeguards to limit political interference. 2. Create an independent asset recovery agency, ARA. This agency, modeled after Kenya's ARA or the UK's Serious Fraud Office, would specialize in identifying and confiscating unexplained wealth, especially properties acquired through proxies. 3. Protect judicial whistleblowers and reformers. Implement legal frameworks and security guarantees for judges and court staff who expose corruption within the justice system or resist political manipulation. Judicial reform is not just a legal necessity, it is a moral one. Without it, no anti corruption framework can succeed. A national compact for good governance and civic renewal. The current scandal must become a national turning point. Rather than allowing public anger to dissipate into cynicism, Sierra Leone's government, civil society, traditional leaders, and diaspora must forge a new social contract, a national compact for ethical leadership and civic engagement. Core elements of the proposed compact: 1. Civic participation in budgeting and oversight. Institutionalize participatory budgeting at local and national levels, allowing citizens to track government expenditure in real time. 2. Term limits and leadership succession planning. Reaffirm constitutional term limits and establish transparent party leadership transition protocols to prevent concentration of power. 3. Ethical leadership curriculum. Introduce compulsory civic ethics and leadership training for all political appointees, parliamentarians, and senior civil servants. 4. Interfaith and traditional leader. Endorsement. Mobilize Sierra Leone's religious and traditional authorities, long trusted by the public, to endorse and champion the compact as custodians of moral values. 5. Annual National Ethics Day. A symbolic but powerful tool where institutions, media, students, and civil society reflect on integrity, governance, and service. Such a compact could be initiated by a national consensus summit convened by the Interreligious Council, the Independent Commission for Peace and National Cohesion, and major civil society bodies. The price of silence, the power of accountability. Though this article does not conclude here, it reflects a story still unfolding. The allegations against First Lady Fatima Bio and her relatives, real estate deals, unaccounted wealth, and entanglements with a convicted drug trafficker are more than just scandals. They are symptoms of a deeper rot in the state's institutions and a warning sign for the future of Sierra Leone's fragile democracy. But the country is not without hope. Its citizens, especially its youth, are more connected, more aware, and more determined than ever to see a new era of governance. Civil society is active, the media is persistent, and international partners are increasingly committed to linking aid to accountability. What remains is a choice. Will the people demand transparency, or will they retreat into resignation? Will leaders uphold the trust placed in them, or will they continue to plunder under the veil of power? Breaking the cycle of dynastic capture in African politics. One of the most alarming patterns emerging from this case, and many others across the continent, is the consolidation of political power and wealth within a narrow elite network of family members, business associates, and loyalists. This dynastic capture erodes meritocracy, weakens institutions, and fuels inequality. How dynastic corruption works. A spouse or sibling of a public official creates a front business. State contracts are funneled through that entity, often without competitive tendering. Proceeds are then used to purchase luxury assets, often offshore, under different names. Watchdog institutions are co-opted or silenced, and media coverage is controlled or intimidated. This cycle has repeated itself across the continent, from the Mugabes in Zimbabwe to the Bongo dynasty in Gabon, and now, allegedly, the Bio family in Sierra Leone. Institutional solutions. 1. Expand definition of politically exposed persons, PPs. Extend anti-corruption oversight to spouses, children, in-laws, and longtime associates of government officials. 2. Mandate conflict of interest declarations. Any government official or contractor must declare familial or business links with public officials before signing state contracts. 3. Adopt ECOWAS-wide beneficial ownership directives. Require public disclosure of the real individuals behind corporate entities, foundations, or land acquisitions, regardless of the country of registration. Through unified legal frameworks and enforcement across West Africa, dynastic wealth capture can be significantly curtailed. Pan-African Framework for Good Governance and Anti-Corruption, as the African Union, AU, advances its Agenda 2063 vision of a prosperous and well-governed Africa. The time has come to move from declarations to implementation. The AU Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, adopted in 2003, remains one of the least enforced instruments. Recommendations for the African Union. establish a continental scorecard ranking member states based on actual anti-corruption enforcement, not just legislation. Empower the African Court of Justice and Human Rights to hear cases involving large-scale looting of public funds and unexplained wealth by political elites. Launch a Pan-African investigative journalism fund to support transnational stories like the Fatima Bio case, where corruption transcends borders. Africa must rise to meet its governance crisis with collective accountability. Advice to African leaders: power is stewardship, not ownership. To African leaders, current and aspiring, this scandal carries hard lessons. You are custodians, not owners, of national resources. When you rise to power, you inherit the hopes of millions: children yearning for education, families in need of health care, youth hungry for opportunity. Every dollar stolen is a child left unvaccinated, a road unbuilt, a future stolen. Remember, legacy is not measured by properties owned, but lives improved. Silencing critics will not protect your reputation. Transparency will. The trappings of wealth may protect you today, but history and justice always find their way. Do not build palaces on the poverty of your people. Do not export your wealth while importing your citizens' suffering. Serve with integrity, and Africa will remember you not as tyrants, but as transformational leaders. Summary of key messages. 1. Unexplained wealth requires urgent investigation. The real estate acquisitions by Fatima Bio and her relatives in the Gambia, worth over $2.1 million, raise red flags that demand independent investigation, both within Sierra Leone and internationally. 2. Procurement, corruption, and elite networks are deeply entrenched. The involvement of top government contractors in facilitating or witnessing these deals reflects systemic vulnerabilities in Sierra Leone's procurement processes and ethics oversight. 3. The judiciary and media are under threat. Without a strong independent judiciary and a protected free press, corruption will continue unchecked. 4. Youth and civil society hold the key to change. Political education, digital activism, and civic engagement by the youth are Sierra Leone's strongest weapons against entrenched political impunity. 5. International partners must link aid to accountability. Donors, lenders, and diplomatic allies must go beyond diplomacy to demand transparency and justice through sanctions, aid conditionalities, and support for anti-corruption reform. 6. Africa needs a governance renaissance. From ECOWAS to the African Union, new mechanisms must be adopted to enforce financial transparency, protect whistleblowers, and ensure ethical leadership across borders. The story of Fatima Bio's real estate empire is not just about Sierra Leone. It is a mirror held up to Africa, a mirror asking whether our leaders will continue to plunder in silence or whether we, the people, will rise to reclaim our future. This is our moment. Let us not waste it. Thank you for watching another fearless video from the Bold African Voice, BAV, where we hold power to account and amplify the voices of the people. If this report moved you, angered you, or made you think, then do something. Like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Join the movement for truth and transparency in Africa. Together, let's build a continent where leadership is earned, not inherited. Until next time, stay bold and stay vigilant.